The origins of Chinese gardens date back to the Ming Dynasty, from 1600 to 1046 BC. They were used by royalty for hunting, growing fruits and vegetables, and also as a place to relax. By the time of the Han Dynasty, 221 to 618 AD, the number of gardens had increased greatly. During this time, ownership of gardens by scholars, government officials, and aristocrats became more common. Furthermore, the focus of these gardens shifted toward motifs of peace, meditation, and escape from society, all of which are common in Buddhist ideology. Chinese gardens were still extremely popular through the Ming and Qing dynasties, and remain a symbol of Chinese culture today, persisting through decades of changes in religious ideologies. Three types of gardens have evolved with the development of Chinese culture: imperial gardens, private gardens, and natural scenic sites. Imperial gardens were large and lavish, and built exclusively for the pleasure of the emperors and their families. Imperial gardens can be classified into three general types. 1. Li Gong, or palace away from the palace, was built in the suburbs of capital cities or in localities of scenic beauty and environmental comfort. Emperors usually spent prolonged periods at the Li Gong. 2. Jin Yuan, Forbidden Garden, was usually built next to the imperial palace for easy access on holidays, birthdays, or other festivals. 3. Small gardens or courts were built in various parts of the palace proper. One can readily identify the third type of imperial gardens in Beijing today. Private gardens, also called literati gardens, were built for those who demanded simplicity, elegance, and poetic meaning in their personal world. Natural scenic sites were developed from larger areas of special character and beauty, often including monasteries as focal points. In contrast to Japanese temple gardens, Chinese monasteries were located in places of unusual scenic beauty, so that their monks would not be compelled to develop additional gardens within the complex. Historians generally agree that the contribution by the Yuan dynasty in the development of the gardens is limited and easily overshadowed by the works of the Ming. During this period, the cult of the garden could very often be made to fit within the context of Buddhist ethics. The physical characteristics of the Chinese urban garden were well established by the early Ming era, and, from that time on, garden design increasingly developed in sophistication and technique. During the Ming period, Suzhou, termed the Venice of China, was a gathering place for leading poets and painters, which may account for the number of outstandingly beautiful gardens which brought the city fame. Ji Cheng, born in 1582, was a great Ming gardener, painter, and author who wrote the influential treatise Yuan Ye, the Manual of Chinese Garden Design. Yuan Ye, essentially a summation of Ji's lifelong practices of gardening, is the early monograph on Chinese garden design and construction to have survived to this day. In his Yuan Ye, Ji Cheng advocates a natural look in designed scenery so that, though man-made, it will look like something created naturally. The Ming author and practitioner Wen Zhengheng set a high goal for the design of the gardens. In his Changwu Zi, Notes on Life's Trivialities, Wen demanded that the design of the gardens should reach a state of perfection that the experience of roaming in one would cause the user to forget his age, forget to go home, and forget his fatigue. One such account was recorded by the Ming scholar Qi Baojia, who confessed, "I would go to the garden early in the morning and come back late at night and leave my domestic business to be attended under the lamplight." In that sense, they promoted the idea of spiritual thought as opposed to tangible activity, and were meant to distract the eye and mind from the hassles of daily life. Regarding design methods, Ming-era Buddhist gardens were largely founded on a non-material attachment to beauty, and could vary in size and style. Imperial gardens were often large and grandiose, whereas private gardens of scholars and artisans were often smaller and more graceful. Almost always, however, Chinese gardens incorporated hills, water, and a walking path. Every structure, rock, and plant was positioned in a specific way to please the owner and increase one's desire to meditate. Unsurprisingly, these gardens have played an important part in Chinese art and literature, while art and literature have inspired the creation of many gardens. For example, the school of painting called Shan Shui, which literally translates to mountains and water, began in the 5th century. Shan Shui established the principles of Chinese landscape painting, which were actually very similar to those of Chinese gardening. While these paintings were not meant to be realistic, they portrayed what the artist felt having visited a garden, and not what he saw. The Garden of the Inept Administrator by Wen Zhengming is an example of a traditional garden of a government official. It is more modest than an imperial garden, but still incorporates basic elements such as a stream and overhead structure for relaxation. This painting also shows the high regard the Chinese and Buddhists in particular had for the 3 arts: poetry, calligraphy, and painting. Elegant Gathering in the Apricot Garden by Qi Huan provides an illustration of the social aspect of gardens. Scholar officials are seen in this painting meeting as was custom to relax and show off each individual's property. The 16 Lohans by Wu Bin shows the collaboration of Buddhism and Chinese gardens. Lohans were believed to be magical Buddhist holy men who could be disguised as monks on earth. This image shows Lohans in a garden seemingly discussing and meditating. Paintings After Ancient Masters, Scholars in a Garden by Chen Hongshu is another example of the inclusion of scholars in the culture of Chinese gardens. The title suggests that the subjects of the painting are intellectuals and are actively practicing meditation. There is no shortage of art and literature that illustrate the intersection of Buddhism and Chinese gardens. The relevance of Chinese gardens in Ming culture is easy to recognize when examining these works of art. It would be especially relevant if one was Buddhist or a scholar. In conclusion, the gardens of the Ming Dynasty were heavily influenced by Buddhism, and they have continued to influence the religious discourse in China to this day.